The wisest and oldest elf in all of Middle-earth was not Elrond of Rivendell, nor the Lady Galadriel of the Golden Wood. He was a forgotten lord who possessed the one physical trait utterly forbidden to his entire race. His name was Círdan, and his patient vigil over the ages was as crucial to the downfall of Sauron as any great battle. His foresight was a weapon that makes the Palantiri seem like children's toys, and his quiet sacrifice made Gandalf's entire mission possible. To understand Círdan is to understand the long defeat, the patient hope, and the deep magic that flowed beneath the great wars of the world. He was not a king of a golden realm or a warrior famed for his sword. He was the shipwright, the guardian of the final path, the keeper of the sea, and the memory of a world that was fading into legend. His story begins before the first sunrise, before the rising of the moon, in the twilight of the world, under the light of the stars. He was there when the elves first awoke, one of the very first of the firstborn to open his eyes to the world. He was not born, he simply was. This makes him older than almost any living thing in Middle-earth. He walked the shores of the sacred lake of Quivien when the world was young, and the Valar themselves still walked as physical beings among their children. He was of the Teleri, the third and largest of the elven kindreds, those who were entranced by the sound of water, and who would become the greatest mariners and shipbuilders in the history of Arda. When the Vala Orom came to lead the elves on the great journey to the blessed realm of Valinor, Círdan was among those who followed, but his heart was ever torn. He felt the call of the sea, the pull of the west, yet his love for Middle-earth and his own people was a powerful anchor. Along the vast journey, a great number of the Teleri, enchanted by the wild lands, chose to linger. It was Círdan, alongside their king, Elwë Thingol, who led them. But when Thingol vanished, lost in the enchanted forest of Non-Elmoth, the Teleri were thrown into disarray. Many refused to continue, and Sir Círdan, out of loyalty and love for his people, chose to remain with them. He forsook the light of the two trees of Valinor to become a leader to the abandoned. He would never see the Undying Lands until the very end of the world. He sacrificed paradise for his people. This singular choice defined his entire existence. While the Noldor and Valinor learned high arts and crafts from the Valar, Círdan and his people learned the secrets of the sea from the Maya Ase. They settled in the region of the Fallas, on the westernmost shores of Beleriand, and there they built the first havens in Middle-earth, Eglarest and Brithembar. Círdan the Shipwright had found his purpose. Under his wise rule, his people became the Falathrim, the elves of the coast, and they built the first ships to ever sail the seas of the mortal lands. For thousands of years, there was peace. The sun and moon had not yet been made, and Círdan's realm prospered under the starlight. His mariners explored the coasts, and his artisans grew masterful. But in the north, a shadow was stirring. Morgoth, the first and greatest of the Dark Lords, was stirring in his fortress of Angband. The peace was about to be shattered. But how could this coastal lord, so far removed from the high politics of the Elven kings, become a central pillar in the fight against absolute evil, not just once, but in 3 separate ages of the world? The answer began when the Noldor returned to Middle-earth, full of fire and wrath, pursuing Morgoth for the theft of the Silmarils. Círdan and his people did not join in the kinslaying or the terrible oath of Feanor. They were a people of peace, but they were not weak. Círdan welcomed the exiles and became a steadfast ally to the Noldoran princes. It was his shipwrights who helped Finrod Felagund build the hidden city of Nargothrond. It was his havens that provided a safe port and a source of strength against the encroaching darkness. He was no frontline commander, but his wisdom was already legendary. He was a keeper of the old ways, a connection to the world's pristine dawn. But wisdom alone could not hold back the tide of evil forever. Morgoth's power grew, and the great alliances of elves and men began to crumble. The breaking point came at the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. It was a cataclysmic defeat for the free peoples. One by one, the elven kingdoms fell, and the gaze of Morgoth turned at last to the sea. The havens of Círdan were besieged and utterly destroyed. The beautiful cities were reduced to rubble, the white shores stained black with blood. Yet Círdan endured. He led a remnant of his people to the Isle of Balar, a small island in the bay, taking with him the young Ereinion Gil-galad, who would one day become the last High King of the Noldor in Middle-earth. Círdan was now a king without a kingdom, a lord of refugees on a lonely island. His life's work turned to ash. The First Age ended in the apocalyptic War of Wrath, where the Valar themselves intervened to cast Morgoth into the void. The very lands of Beleriand were broken and drowned beneath the waves. Círdan's old home, the cities he had built, the shores he had walked, all of it was gone, lost to the sea he so loved. Yet again Círdan endured. He led the survivors east, into the new lands of the Second Age, and in the Gulf of Lihun, he established his last and greatest realm, Mithlond, the Grey Havens. Here, his purpose shifted. He was no longer building a kingdom to last forever, but a doorway to what was lost. The Grey Havens became a place of passage, the last port for elves weary of the mortal world, seeking the straight road back to Valinor. Círdan became the guardian of farewells, a living embodiment of memory and longing. He remained while so many others left, his personal sacrifice continuing into a new age. And it was in this new age that his true gift, his unbelievable foresight, would be tested as never before. Because a new evil was rising, not with armies and dragons, but with whispers and fair promises. A being calling himself Annatar came to the elves, offering knowledge and power to help them heal the hurts of Middle-earth. He was beautiful, wise, and seemingly benevolent. The elven smiths of a region, led by Celebrimbor, were entranced. Even the wise, like Galadriel and Gil-galad, were wary but could not fully pierce his disguise. But Círdan saw him for what he was. From his distant havens, Círdan counseled Gil-galad to put no trust in this newcomer. He could not explain how he knew. It was not a reasoned argument, but a deep, intuitive perception of the soul. He felt a cold shadow behind the bright facade. He saw the abyss lurking behind the fair eyes. His counsel was heeded by the High King, and Annatar, who was of course Sauron in disguise, was denied access to the kingdom of Lindon. But it was too late. In a region, the damage was done. The Rings of Power were forged. When Sauron put on the One Ring in Mordor, his betrayal was revealed. The elves with the lesser rings were enslaved, but the three, Narya, Nenya, and Vilya, remained untouched by his evil, as Celebrimbor had forged them alone. The High King Gil-galad knew war was now inevitable. He took possession of the two most powerful rings, Vilya, the Ring of Air, and Narya, the Ring of Fire. He gave Vilya to his herald, Elrond, a mighty warrior and loremaster. But Narya, the Ring of Fire, the kindler of hearts, he gave not to a great warrior or a queen, but to the quiet, watchful shipwright of the Grey Havens. Why give the ring meant to inspire courage in others to a lord who would guard the rear? Because Gil-galad knew Círdan's war was not one of swords, but of spirit. His task was to keep hope alive, to kindle the hearts of others when all other lights went out. For the rest of the Second Age, Círdan guarded Narya in secret. He fought alongside the last alliance of elves and men. He stood on the slopes of Mount Doom and witnessed the fall of Gil-galad and the death of Elendil. He was there, beside Elrond, when Isildur cut the One Ring from Sauron's hand. And in that moment, Círdan's foresight screamed a warning. He and Elrond urged Isildur to cast the ring into the fires of the mountain, to destroy it forever. Círdan knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his soul, that to keep it was to guarantee Sauron's return. But Isildur, now enslaved by the ring's power, refused, claiming it as a weregild for his father. It was the crucial mistake that would define the next 3,000 years of history. As the Third Age dawned, Círdan returned to his long vigil at the Grey Havens. And it was now, after more than 7,000 years of life in the mortal lands, that a change began to occur. A physical manifestation of his immense age and weariness. A sign that set him apart from every other elf in existence. He grew a beard. For elves, time does not wither the body in the same way as it does for men. Yet Círdan had remained in Middle-earth for so long, had endured so much sorrow and loss, that the weight of ages began to show upon him in this unique way. He had entered what Tolkien called a third cycle of life, an age so extreme that few, if any, elves had ever reached it while remaining in the mortal world. He was now a living monument, his appearance as strange to his own kind as it would be to Menan, and his greatest test of wisdom was yet to come. Around the year 1000 of the Third Age, a ship arrived at Mithlond. It carried 5 passengers, beings who appeared to be old men, stooped with age and clad in simple robes of white, brown, blue, and gray. They were the Istari, the wizards, sent by the Valar to aid the free peoples against the growing shadow of Sauron. To most, they were merely wise counselors. But Sir Círdan, with the power of Narya and his own innate perception, saw through their humble guise. He saw the blinding angelic light of the Mahyar within them. He understood their divine origin and their sacred purpose. And as he looked upon the last to arrive, the one in gray who seemed the least of them, the quietest and most humble, Círdan's foresight pierced the veil of fate itself. He saw deeper into this wizard's heart and destiny than anyone in Middle-earth, perhaps even deeper than the wizard himself. In this gray pilgrim, Olorin, whom men called Gandalf, Sir Círdan perceived the greatest spirit and the wisest mind. He knew, with absolute certainty, that this was where the hope of the world would rest. And so, Círdan made a secret, pivotal choice. He approached the Grey Wizard, a being he had only just met, and prepared to give away the one great power he had guarded for over an age. "Take now this ring," Círdan said, his voice as low as the tide. "For thy labors and thy cares will be heavy, but in all it will support thee, and defend thee from weariness. For this is the Ring of Fire, and with it you may rekindle hearts in a world that grows cool." Gandalf accepted the ring, and the secret was kept between them. But this gift, this act of incredible foresight, was also an act of profound defiance, and it was not unseen. But what of the others? What of the leader of the Istari, Saruman the White, chief of their order, the most powerful of their number, and the most learned in the lore of the Rings of Power? By every right, by every measure of hierarchy and perceived might, if one of the three was to be gifted to their order, it should have been his. And yet, this ancient elf, this keeper of the havens, had looked upon them all and judged him unworthy. He had given the Ring of Fire not to the brilliant white flame, but to the humble gray ember. Was this the moment? Was this the first bitter seed of jealousy that would one day blossom into outright treason? To Saruman, this wasn't just a slight, it was a condemnation. Círdan, one of the firstborn whose eyes had seen the light of the trees in Valinor, had looked into Saruman's soul and found it wanting. He had looked into Gandalf's and seen the true hope of the world. For a spirit as proud as Quashrumo, the Maya who became Saruman, this was an unforgivable insult, a wound to his pride that would never, ever heal. Círdan's foresight was a powerful weapon, but did he see the full consequence of this choice? Did he realize that in empowering one friend, he was creating a far more dangerous enemy? Or did he see Saruman's eventual fall with perfect clarity and intentionally withhold the ring to limit the damage he would one day cause? The truth is lost. Another secret that Círdan took with him to the sea. For another 2,000 years, Círdan returned to his long watch. He remained at the Grey Havens, a constant, unchanging guardian at the edge of the world. His task was not to ride forth into glorious battle, but to perform a far more difficult duty: to wait. He was the final welcome and the last farewell. He built the ships that would carry the last of his kind away from the world they had loved and fought for, back to the undying lands. Every ship that sailed was a small death, a piece of Middle-earth's magic fading forever. And Círdan was the master of these ceremonies of sorrow. He provided counsel to the kings of Arnor, sent aid when he could, and kept the port of Mithlond as a beacon of elven light in a darkening land. He was the anchor point for the forces of good in the west, the quiet heart that kept hope beating. And so the age turned. The shadow was defeated, not by the might of elven kings or the lore of the Maiar, but by the quiet courage of the small. And with the passing of the One Ring, the power of the Three Rings also faded. Their purpose was fulfilled. The world was now safe, but it was also diminished. A great weariness fell upon the last of the Eldar. It was time. At last, they came to the Grey Havens, the final company. Elrond, master of Imladris, Galadriel, the Lady of Lorien, and Gandalf, his task complete. With them came the ring-bearers, Bilbo and Frodo, for whom no true healing could be found in Middle-earth. And waiting for them on the quay, as he had waited for millennia, was Círdan the Shipwright. He greeted them not as a king or a lord, but as an old friend welcoming travelers home at the end of the longest of roads. His gaze passed over Elrond and Galadriel, his kin from the elder days. Then, he looked at Gandalf the White, who had been Olorin in Grey when they first met on that very shore. Sir Círdan's foresight had been proven true. Here was the spirit Círdan had deemed the wisest, returned victorious. Here was the rekindler of hearts, his labor done. Here was the fulfillment of a choice made 2,000 years before, a choice that had helped turn the very tide of history. Sir Círdan had guarded a ring of power, only to give it away. He had remained, while all others left. His was the victory of patience. The last ship was ready. Círdan had built it for this very moment. As the elves and the hobbits boarded, he stood as the master of ceremonies one final time. He had seen the first ship of the Númenóreans arrive in pride. He had seen the last ships of his own people depart in sorrow. Now he oversaw the end of an entire epoch. The great white ship unfurled its silver sails. It glided silently away from the quay, catching a wind that seemed to blow from another world, a wind that smelled of memory and eternal shores. Círdan watched it go. He, the oldest of them all, who remembered the light of the trees before the sun or moon, remained. He would be the last. His long watch was over. He had kept the havens, he had aided the wise, and he had seen the final hope of his age sail into the west. His was the first story, and the last. From the awakening at Cuivién to the final dimming of the light of the Eldar in Middle-earth, Círdan was there, the anchor of the elves, the keeper of the final shore, now released from his sacred charge. The tale is told. From the music of the Ainur to the final sailing from Mithlond, the great tapestry of the first, second, and third ages is complete. But history is never truly over. New stories are always waiting to be discovered. To ensure you don't miss the next chronicle, subscribe to the _Silmarillion_Chronicles. Become a part of the legend.